Precinct 4, Place 2. Just a little bit about me. I'm a veteran. I'm a nurse. I've been a nurse almost 16 years. I'm also an ally. My areas of, the areas of nursing that I have worked have been mostly mental health, substance abuse, and corrections. Your son's so cute. And very briefly, my platform for Justice of the Peace is I'm running on ethics, education, and empathy. Ethics because Brazoria County, the county politics over many years have become very incestuous, very nepotistic, very, you know, I can name 6 positions off the top of my head where they all have the same names. You know, it's father, son, husband, wife, you name it. Daughter-in-law, father-in-law. And I want to help break that up. Because if you're just employing or working with family, you're not going to hold them accountable. So you need somebody from outside the system that is going to hold them accountable. Also, nurses we are known to be the most trustworthy profession. Believe it or not, that's actually a poll. The other thing is education. I have put out some videos on Facebook regarding what a JP does, what a PAC is, and even some medical content about like what mRNA vaccines are, and some of the other things going on right now. I even put one out on acetaminophen when there was that whole thing with acetaminophen possibly causing autism, all that stuff. So I believe education is incredibly important, especially because most people don't know what a JP actually does. And empathy, because whenever you're seeing somebody in court, no matter what it is, and JPs typically handle, just fine-only offenses. So we're not talking things that have like bail or anything like that. Like I'm not going to run into anybody that's, there for a major crime, a violent crime. But you're still seeing people on kind of a bad day. And I think giving them a little bit of empathy, a little bit of grace, especially when, if you're handling like a juvenile case, maybe that parent is a working parent. They work 2 and 3 jobs like my mother did. And, kids get bored, And so I believe in giving a grace, but I also believe in following the law. That's also very important to me. Also, as JPs, one of the things that a lot of people don't realize that we handle, which is also a very sensitive part of the job, is inquests, which is death investigations. And because Brazoria County does not have a dedicated medical examiner's office, we actually use Galveston County. We actually don't even have death investigators in the county. And we have, almost 380,000 residents. And no death investigators, and that's a huge geographical area. Brazoria County is very large. And so, if you have somebody who's going to be investigating a possibly suspicious death or any of the other, categories of death that falls under the inquest statute, you want somebody that knows something about the medical field, something about anatomy, something about, diseases. Anatomy and physiology. You want somebody that can look at a medical chart and go, oh, hey, this could be a contributing factor. And because I've worked in corrections and I've been a nurse for almost 16 years now, I can talk to both, medical personnel. I can talk to, law enforcement personnel. And, we can all be on the same page. I'm very excited. I ran last year for Precinct 4, Place 1, got 42.5% of the vote. So I feel like we can do better this time around. I think we've got some wonderful backing with the party and just all of the wonderful candidates. We've all been helping each other out, so this has really been a wonderful experience so far. I want to thank everybody again for coming out. My name is Stephanie Baird. I am running for Brazoria County Justice of the Peace, Precinct 4, Place 2. And thank you all very much.
That's my fault. We good? Okay. Thank you, Stephanie. Next candidate I have coming up is Jim Mooney. He is running county judge, right? Yeah, he is running for county judge for Brazoria County.
Okay, is that good?
Can you stand over here closer to the podium? You don't have to be
I can do whatever you want me to do.
I just lit for the podium.
Good evening. My name is Jim Mooney. I'm running for county judge of Brazoria County. It's not my first rodeo at doing this. I did this 4 years ago. And what got me to do that was watching Commissioners Court supposedly draw the lines for the commissioners and what their territories would be. And when I say territories, if you don't believe it's their territory, go mess with one of the county commissioners' territories. They'll let you know they're the king of that place. When I say that's what got me to run is the county judge is not one that listens to court hearings. He's like the CEO of a company or a board, which means he should be leading the board, not waiting for them to direct him. And I feel like for the last 16 to 20 years, nothing's been done but what the commissioners wanted and not what the county residents needed, because the county commissioner was just waiting to be told what needed to be done next. To give you a brief history, I started out my first 20 years of a working living, working in the chemical industry, just as a simple old plant operator. At a very young age, I was elected to the negotiating committee as their chairman. And if you don't remember what the late 70s and early 80s were like, that's when the new phrase ESOP was developed, Employee Stock Ownership Plans. Believe me, none of them worked out to where the employees eventually owned the plant. There were a select few that ended up owning the plant. I also was elected their secretary and treasurer of the local, which was the largest OCAW local in the state of Texas at the time. Things went on. I ended up being the city administrator for the city of Manville. After a couple of years of doing that, then I ended up going to work for cherry companies. Excuse me. In doing that, the last 20 years, I was the vice president in charge of their crushed concrete division. When I took over that division, it was doing about $1 to $1.5 million a year. 20 years later, when I left, doesn't sound like a lot, but if we weren't doing anywhere close to $39 million a year, people were asking me what was wrong. So I know how to develop things. I know how to make them work, and I'm not afraid to work. As Stephanie mentioned, nepotism runs deep in the courthouse. You can probably find that in just about any courthouse. But I will have to say, I think Brazoria County has taken it to a new level. So, as like she said, we're out here to break up that routine. I want to be your county judge. I know in the past, not only are our taxes going up, but at the same time, the Commissioners Court has seen favoritism to give tax abatements. And it's not just Brazoria County. Fort Bend County does it. Galveston County does it. They've all kind of gotten caught into this routine to where if you want big business to come to your county, they've got their hand out and they want to know, what are you going to do for them? That's not always good. And I'm not totally against tax abatements, but to me, if you're going to give somebody a tax break, then it should benefit all the tax people of the county, not just a select few in a certain area or in a certain job market. So with that, I'm Jim Mooney. I want to be your next county judge. I do plan on being your next county judge. So I do thank you for your time and would appreciate your votes.
Thank you, Jim. ahead. The next speaker that we have is Konstantinos. He is the congressional candidate running for CD 14, which is Randy Weber's current position. And he's going to give you a little bit more insight into his platform, some of the issues he's concerned about, and a little bit of background of him as well.
Good evening. How's everyone doing? Awesome. Well, thank you so much for showing up here for a town hall. I know there's so many other things y'all probably would rather be doing on a Friday night. So I appreciate you for putting the future of this country above your Friday night plans. So my name is Konstantinos Vogiatsis, and I'm a proud resident of Iowa Colony in Brazoria County. But let me be clear, I'm not a proud resident because of who represents us. I'm a proud resident because of who my neighbors are. And when I look at who represents us, it's people that don't have empathy, people that are bought out by outsized corporate influence, people that don't shop at our grocery stores. They have people doing their shopping for us, people that have no idea what it's like to live the lives and realities that we live. So when I truly say that I'm proud to live where I live, it's because of all of you here, for people who show up at events like the No Kings Day, which we had over 713 people show up, people that show up to our meetings with the Brazoria County Democratic Party, people who show up to all types of meetings for civic engagement. Y'all are rock stars, and I'm hoping that we grow this movement. Before I start talking about my own campaign, I do want to acknowledge that, yes, I'm speaking on behalf of my own campaign right now, but what we're trying to do, what Cameron and I are trying to do, what we're trying to do with Stephanie and Jim and all of the other amazing candidates that are running on this one big, beautiful blue ticket is a movement. It's not about one specific campaign. One campaign can't build all of these connections that we need to rebuild with unions, with community organizations. It's going to take a literal movement of people that are running, people that are not running. It's going to take every single person in this room. So, why am I running? I'm running because I am sick and tired of having to beg those empowered to give a damn to see that wages are not rising with inflation, to see that we are literally being priced out of homes, our own homes. Some people that have owned homes for 20, 30, 40 years are being priced out of them with property tax increases and home insurance increases and flood insurance increases, where our own representatives, they really frankly don't give a damn because they are bought out by the very corporations that are trying to price us out of our own homes. So I'm a former auditor, quit my job to run this campaign. And one of our sayings is follow the money. So let's follow the money, y'all. So over the past several years, ever since Hurricane Harvey hit, that's when I started thinking, like, you know, if I'm going to live in Texas, let me start saving up for a home. This was before I even graduated college, and I was making, you know, a tiny monthly stipend as an RA at the university. And I have this spreadsheet with simple, like, metrics and costs of how I'm going to buy my first house. And at the beginning, I budgeted about $900 for home insurance, for everything, for flood, for wind, for all of that. This was back in, like, 2016, 17 when I moved here. And after all the storms that hit us, I graduated, rented for a couple years, then went to buy my own house. I was shocked that I got a $3,000 estimate for home insurance. And at the time, I'm like, okay, guess that's the fact of life. Okay, so I bought my house, but my down payment. Hurricane Beryl hit, didn't put a single claim on my insurance. A lot of my neighbors had their roofs missing shingles, some fences down, minor things. My community wasn't severely hit in Iowa Colony. Lo and behold, a couple months later, I got my renewal notice, and it more than doubled to almost $5,000 in Iowa Colony for a little, like, 2,500 square foot home. And at the time, Troy Nells was my rep. He's still my representative. And I looked, he famously doesn't do any town halls, as y'all might know, which isn't a surprise. And I looked to see where he receives money, and lo and behold, he receives tens of thousands of dollars from the insurance companies that raise our rates. Same with Randy Weber. He recently received a $20,000 check from the insurance industry lobby. So he sure as hell ain't gonna do anything to cap our home insurance rates, to cap any of the prices that are going up every single year. And that's really frustrating to me. And all Congress men are and congressmen and women are able to form a advisory committee. And when you look at who's on those advisory committees that advise them, people like Troy Nels and Randy Weber and even Cody Vasu, they sure as heck don't have citizens like us. Most of the people on their advisory committees don't even live in the district. It's CEOs and people with, big checkbooks that they can write, and they price us out of, our own lives that we're trying to live. And having immigrant parents who came to America and naturalized almost 30 years ago, seeing them work when I was a child, work 2 jobs each, so they were pretty overemployed. But they were still able to give us a pretty comfortable life. And the way things are going now, I don't think anybody that's even making a decent living is able to live comfortably anymore. So when we have state legislatures and people in Washington, D.C. that prioritize redistricting, that prioritize building ballrooms, that prioritize giving tax breaks to the rich, of course, their focus isn't the people just like us sitting here today. We're the ones that have to go home and look at the bills. And as a 27-year-old, I cannot imagine a time anywhere in the near future where I'll be able to raise kids and work a normal 40-hour-a-week job and still make ends meet. And I also get sad and worried for the people on fixed incomes that are retiring who can no longer have a dignified life anymore when they're priced out of that. And criticism that I always get as a young candidate is that, oh, you don't know what it's like to live, or you don't have no kids in the school district, how can you represent this? Or you don't have an elderly grandparent in the United States, you don't know what it's like to go through Medicare and Medicaid. And to be honest, I understand that sentiment, because when you have representatives that don't live that reality, of course, as we can see, a lot of them don't end up giving a damn about any of the issues that don't personally affect them, but that's not me. I have empathy, and I recognize the humanity in everyone. I don't have to go through what everyone is going through to care about a specific issue. So the biggest part of my platform as a congressional candidate is, before we can tackle affordability, before we can tackle reforming our healthcare and education system and fortifying it, we have to tackle corruption. Because when our representatives are attending congressional hearings on Monday and then trading stocks like it's a game on Tuesday, they don't really represent us. They're after their portfolios, not their constituents. And 2, when we have congressional people that hold leadership positions for decades on end on both sides of the party, they stop answering to the actual people. They're only there to protect themselves. And people like Randy Weber had over 12 years to take action on all of these issues that are affecting us, to make us leaders. We're the energy capital of America. We should be the energy capital of the world here on the Gulf Coast, especially the 14th congressional district should be the leader in the world. And yet, he skips congressional meetings, skips votes, and doesn't fight for us. So that's what I want to, try to run and actually give our district a voice at the table. But it's a very hard road, because I'm not running against Randy Weber. I'm running against a machine that is not meant to see people like me or people like us, any of us in the room, win, because we don't come from money, we don't come from power, and they always underestimate us. But to that I say, underestimate us at your own peril, because the voice of the people will always be better and stronger than the voice of a checkbook, in my opinion. And the results on Monday, I think on Tuesday, nationwide proved it. In New Jersey, in Virginia, in New York, and even in California, we beat out any banker, billionaire, millionaire that put out money to beat out the voice of the people. And I think that was very powerful, and makes me very optimistic to think about what change in Texas might look like next year. And like I said before, it's not just about my campaign, because you can send me to Washington, D.C., but if I don't have people back home to let me know what we need to fix, what resources need to be allocated, I'm not going to be able to do my job pretty effectively. So come March, please make sure you vote for your favorite candidates in the primary, and then come general election, of course, vote and get your friends to vote. But voting alone is not enough. You need to make sure that you volunteer, that you organize, you help mobilize people, Because if each one of you can bring an extra 20 people to the polls, we can change results precinct by precinct, slowly, county by county, and hopefully district. But it's going to be a hard road ahead, but I'm very excited about this because we're building some momentum for the first time that hasn't been seen for the first time in several decades in these parts of Texas. I've been speaking with people knocking on doors trying to get my petitions who get so emotional when a candidate just knocks on their door, especially a congressional candidate, and they share with me some very heart-wrenching stories, especially people that have children that are service members and not getting paid right now, people that have relatives that are in the hospital and they don't know what the health insurance premium increases are going to do to their budget next year. So hearing all those stories is tough, but it gives me hope, and I'm glad that I'm able to inspire hope and looking forward to that. So I know it's going to be a difficult road ahead, but I'm ready to fight hard for the America that I believe in. And I know that y'all are also ready to fight hard for the America that we all believe in. And let's do it.
Thank you, Konstantinos. That was a good overview, kind of what we've been feeling out here in rural areas, of feeling left behind, feeling not that we haven't been heard by both Democrats and Republicans. But I'll touch on that a little bit more as we get further into this. But again, to reintroduce myself, my name is Cameron Rollwitz. I'm running for Texas State Senate District 11. That seat is currently held by Mays Middleton, who is an oil tycoon. He runs a multi-million-dollar oil business out near Baytown and has about 3 employees. Mays Middleton got his seat through winning the Republican primary in 2022, as we did not have a candidate to challenge him in that election. Since then, he has now gone on to seek Attorney General as his next office. I have moved here pretty recently. I grew up in North Houston. I'm from Georgia originally. Went to Klein Oak High School up in North Houston, and then my wife and I, shortly after our first kid, bought a house down here in Iowa Colony, and have been putting down roots, meeting people, getting to know the area, trying to get connected with the community. And as I get more and more involved with the community and meeting people, there's a lot of hurt out here. There's a lot of hurt out in rural areas of people just struggling to make ends meet, let alone find their next job, buy a house, progress in their career. They're just trying to figure out how they're going to put food on the table and get their next prescription filled. And that's been the trend from both a data standpoint and a personal standpoint of the last 30 years in Texas. Since graduating, I now work at a company doing data analytics. I spend my days looking through and auditing our current processes, our systems, and everything that we spend our money on and have people interact with from an employee standpoint. My job is to go through, identify the waste in those processes, identify systems that we have purchased that we have long since forgotten about, but are still shelling out tens, hundreds of thousands of dollars a year in those contracts. As I took that same framework and applied it to Texas, as I was looking and getting more involved in our local politics here after moving here from College Station, the trend that is a decline is both startling and hard to find. A lot of our data is very difficult to find from the state of Texas standpoint. Getting information on property tax rates, on our general, maternity mortality rates, we've either stopped tracking those metrics because we've changed laws and the next report was directly contradicting that law was beneficial to our population, and we just decided we weren't going to track it anymore. If we don't know it's a problem or we don't have metrics on it, how can we address it? So the example I gave of maternal mortality rates, the nation average for maternal mortality, which is essentially how many women out of 100,000 die after childbirth. The national rate is about 18%, if I remember correctly. After Roe v. Wade was repealed and I can't quite remember the term for it, but we had a law on the books that was set to go into effect as soon as Roe v. Wade was overturned. After that year that happened, that was 2021, I believe, our mortality rate, our maternal mortality rate went from a 16% up to 56%. And then we stopped tracking that metric because it makes the people running our state government look really, really bad. And this is consistent across a lot of our different metrics. We see it in just the state budget. We see it in our property taxes. We see it in a lot of these amendments that were passed cutting off potential revenue streams for the state. We are barreling headfirst into an economic crisis for the second largest economy in the state, or in the country. We only get money from the state government through sales tax, property taxes for your local municipalities, and other various taxes that we include. So our $330 billion a year budget comes primarily from our sales tax. Our property taxes have been increasing year after year after year, and we've not seen any sort of relief. But as we continue to close these other tax revenues, we only have one other option: increase property taxes or increase our sales tax. So, and that's where a lot of these amendments that I'll get to in a little bit really impact and really make that much, much more difficult for the state to bring in revenue and ease the tax burden on the average Texan. Because as we've seen with a lot of these amendments, with a lot of our tax code, it is intended to incentivize businesses to come to Texas and then pay absolutely nothing when they get here. They will then take all the tax breaks, they pay out of our property tax revenue, they generate about 20% of that tax revenue. So out of the $84 billion a year we collect in property taxes in Texas, only about 21 billion of that is corporate property taxes. We're essentially paying an 80% burden to encourage businesses to come into our state, into our county, and then not pay us a livable wage. We are making it to where they are making money hand over fist because they're not paying additional taxes as part of coming to Texas and being a part of this economy to essentially exploit us. So a lot of what my platform is covering is affordability. We can't afford our food, especially in the last 6 years. HEB has been a buffer for us in that we're not importing as much of our food from outside the United States. If that changes, or if we are not able to purchase from within the United States anymore, we will see that increase at HEB. We will see it increase across all of our different metrics. We just gave $40 billion to Argentina for their beef. What about all the cattle ranchers that we have out in our counties right now? The cattle ranchers that are having to sell their farms for these new housing developments to come in because they cannot make enough money selling their beef to the middleman that then sells it to us at the grocery store. That's ridiculous. Why are we actively hurting our small businesses and our average Texan and our average working class people who make up the backbone of our culture, our economy, and everything we love about this great state, and we're okay with businesses coming in and exploiting that? That is the Texas that the Texas GOP has established in the last 30 years. It only took them 30 years to be able to do that. In regards to constitutional amendments, we see 17 constitutional amendments on the ballot this year. We have over 500 constitutional amendments in our state constitution. We did not start implementing these constitutional amendments until the late 80s, 90s. We had not been amending our Constitution. And the reason why we started amending it was in our state constitution, if the state legislature, the governor, the Supreme Court, any of our state offices do not explicitly hold that power, they have to pass a constitutional amendment getting that power. So every constitutional amendment that we have passed has ceded more of our authority to the state legislature, to Greg Abbott, to the Supreme Court, to all of our regulatory and governmental bodies slowly over time. And we're at the point now where it's going to take a lot of work to get that power back. But that's what I want to do. In this race, and with all of these constitutional amendments that just passed, the Texas State Senate just became one of the most important legislative bodies in checking gubernatorial power in Texas. specifically in reference to Amendment 12, Proposition 12, which was the Judicial Conduct Board change. Previously, you needed to have some background in law or law or working as a judge to be appointed to the Judicial Board, which monitors not only just the Supreme Court, but all of the courts in Texas, if I remember correctly. Now it is 6 judges, or 6 board members that are appointed by the Supreme Court themselves and approved by the state Senate. The other 7 of this 13-member board are now appointed solely by Greg Abbott and confirmed by the Texas State Senate. If we flip the Texas State Senate, which if Taylor Remitt gets through, that only needs 4 seats in the general election. Taylor Remitt is a great example of how when you go out and connect with people in these rural areas and rural Texans, and you listen to the concerns that they have, you'll find that it's not the culture war. It's not the trans bathroom bill. It's not 10 commandments in schools. It's how do I feed my kids? How do I put gas in my car and go to work every day? How do I get the city to fix the terrible road in the back of my neighborhood that is about to break an axle on my truck if I'm not careful? Those are the kinds of things that are getting more and more difficult, and people are starting to become aware of them and can no longer necessarily ignore them on the same level that they had been previously. So everybody up in Pearland, up in the new residential neighborhoods that have been moved in that aren't necessarily aware of all the issues happening out here, we need to make them aware of that. Out in Alvin, there is the Best Western Hotel right off Highway 6 out here. I went and talked to one of the managers of that hotel to get an idea of what's going on in Alvin. How are the people in Alvin doing? And I went home and had to just sit for about an hour and just decompress from just how much people are struggling out here. These are our fellow Texans. Much of what is keeping Alvin and Manville and these rural cities in Texas running is the local churches, the local food banks, the local medical care that can go around and help these people at their homes who may not be able to get to a hospital or may not even have a hospital within an hour and a half drive, as we're seeing all of these rural hospitals slowly close. There are so many issues in Texas that are all interconnected that first we must start helping our community and learning how to act, learning how to organize, learning how to have these movements, learning how to not let No Kings just be another Saturday we went to 6 months ago. We need to learn how to connect with our local food banks, find our local unions, find our teachers' organizations, find the organizations that are doing the work, and at this point have probably been seeing dwindling numbers and dwindling funds. Because if I'm elected, as Constantino was talking about earlier, that's when the job begins. That's when the real work starts. Because if I go to the state Senate, I'm just a guy. I'm just a man. There's only so much I can do without the support of my local community behind me. So if I'm trying to get a bill passed, say for one of the bills I want to repeal is a bill in the Texas code that bars teachers from joining a union, bars them from collective bargaining, bars them from being able to strike, which means they're getting crushed from both their administrative side of things, parents, and the TEA that is now, as we just saw, taken over Fort Worth ISD. Those people, you want to talk about small government? They just nationalized Fort Worth ISD, basically, for the state of Texas. They just lost all of their elected representatives and now have no say in how their ISD is run. That doesn't sound like a small government that we keep hearing about. When I hear about small government, all I hear about is how can I deregulate and siphon as many of my tax dollars into local businesses that are coming in and exploiting me as possible. One of the ways that we can look at fixing these is through connecting Texans. There's many different ways we can do that, but as we keep hearing, trains built this state after the Civil War, helped us rebuild, helped us reconstruct, and get back to an economic powerhouse that we were. That is why we have the most amount of rail track in any state in the country. One of the things that we can do that can tackle multiple issues at once is connect ourselves through high-speed rail. We already have the route ready to run from Houston to Dallas. Travis County is now doing a feasibility test between San Antonio and Austin. what we've, when we are running the high-speed rail, there's a couple things we can do at the same time. We can actually use some of the infrastructure bill money that we got to run high-speed internet to every single home in Texas under that rail line that we're running. At the same time, we can then also upgrade our electrical transmission lines to take care of expanding our battery storage, fixing our power grid, and converting it to reliable solar or renewable energies. For solar, we would need to also increase our battery bank, but I've got a plan for that on my website already. But those are the kinds of things that, when we look at all the problems in Texas, there's a couple things that we can do to take care of multiple things in one go. If we're running high-speed rail, if we're running fiber, if we're running electrical lines, that's like 3 or 4 different budgets I can pull from the Texas budget that doesn't involve me raising your taxes. Because we have the money. We just don't want to use it. We rolled over, what was it, $110 billion from the budget last year? We have plenty of money to improve things for the average Texan and connect rural, suburban, and urban Texans. Some of the things that we can do when we do have that connection is, if you work remote, don't want to live in the city, move out to Alvin, move out to Angleton, move out to Manville. You've got high-speed internet out there, you can work remotely or take the train ride into town. With that, you're now bringing in tax revenue for these local counties, these local cities, and it gives them a little bit more leverage when they go back to the state government and say, actually, we're growing. You cannot close our rural hospital. We need more funds. Through connecting our rural and urban divide, that is how we unite and take back our state government from the Texas GOP and Greg Abbott. So, with all of that being said, I'm going to run through the constitutional amendments. Some of them are fairly short. Some of them are quite involved. Some of them had a couple extra riders that I wasn't aware of. To start with, Proposition 1 was the state community or state trade school fund. This fund is essentially just created, separated from the general revenue fund, which is how we pay most of our other items. From there, the amendment just has language in it detailing how they can spend it, who controls the money, how money gets moved into that fund, and leaves open some language for the state legislature to regulate that. So for that fund, it has been passed, it exists, but this next legislative session is going to really come down to whether or not it works well or whether it only works for a few people. Proposition 2 is the capital gains tax ban. Again, we already don't have a capital gains tax in Texas, but in effect, what it means is for some of the stock exchanges we just built out here in Texas, say for example, Elon Musk wants to cash out $1 billion worth of Tesla stock. We see $0 of that exchange, ever. So we essentially can just be a currency exchanger with no fee, no revenue coming from that permanently. Proposition 3, or what I like to call guilty until proven innocent, is the required bail denials in certain violent offenses. The wording of this bill leaves plausible deniability that they were trying to do something that would help people. But in reality, if you're accused of a violent crime, even if you did not do it, and there is enough circumstantial evidence, even just to say that you were nearby, your bail will be denied by law, regardless. And you would then have to sit in prison until your court date, until the jury, all of that. There is no going home and being with your family while you wait to be proven innocent or wait for the court trial. So in effect, we have made it to where you are guilty until proven innocent in certain crimes in Texas. Proposition 4 is the water infrastructure bill. This allocates about $1 billion over the next 10 years towards upgrading our water infrastructure, which is in desperate need of an overhaul right now. Similar to the first proposition, it just establishes the fund, establishes a certain amount of money that they're moving over, but leaves the rest of it over to the state legislature in terms of who we're going to be bidding with for these contracts. How are we connecting with, are we doing no bid contracts? All of that is up to the state legislature. So we have the fund, it's for 10 years. After 10 years, it expires. The amendment expires itself and is no longer a part of the Constitution at that point. Proposition 5 is the animal feed exemption. That is, if you have animal feed on your property that is business and you're selling it, you can exempt that from your taxes. Proposition 6 is securities tax, similar to the capital gains tax. Again, we built a bunch of stock exchanges in Texas to encourage businesses to come and have their stocks in our stock exchanges. We have, I think, at this point now, the same amount of stock exchanges as New York and Chicago. But we have removed the ability to have any sort of taxes or fees on that for the state of Texas. So all of that stock trading hands that normally has, 1% fee, 2% fee, or whatever that goes to the New York City budget or the New York State budget or Chicago budget, all of that, we are getting none of that. Proposition 7. This is when things started to get really depressing with these amendments. So Proposition 7 is the surviving spouses of veterans are able to increase their tax exemption on their property taxes. It expires on January 1st, 2027. So they're able to claim that exemption for 1 year unless it is renewed or extended by the next session of the Texas legislature. The next one is the death tax. That is a ban on estate tax. So if my father was to pass in Texas, passes me a certain amount of money, the state cannot take any percentage or any assets or anything from that those assets involved. Proposition 9 was the business tax. That was the one that was allowing certain items that you own outright to count towards what was a $2,500 tax exemption, but was increased to a $125,000 tax exemption. So initially that was if you were the local handyman, you buy a driver, a drill, anything like that, you can write that off as part of a tool that you use to make income. Now that has been increased to $125,000. There were no restrictions on who can claim that, just as long as you were a business operating in the state of Texas. So essentially all businesses can have a roughly $125,000 tax write-off. The fire tax exemption, that was the one that if you lost your house to a fire, you would not have any taxes to pay on that property. That one, fortunately, did not have an expiration date. It's one of the few of these tax ones that did not have an expiration date. The senior tax exemption, that is anybody over the age of 65, I believe, is able to exempt what was $10,000, but is now $60,000 on their property taxes. That also expires on January 1st, 2027. And then Proposition 12, which I had talked to a little bit earlier, was the judicial conduct review. But that is what has made the state Senate so important in this upcoming election. Because if somehow Greg Abbott gets reelected, it is the only check on the people that have the ability to remove our judges without anybody saying no. There is no check on that. So of the 7 people who are appointed and confirmed by the Senate by Greg Abbott, there were also no experience requirements. You did not have to be a lawyer. You did not have to be a judge. Anybody could be appointed to that board as long as they are confirmed by the Senate, which is insane to me. But that is where the Senate becomes so crucial in preventing our courts from being essentially just anybody who ran, God forbid, on a Democrat ticket. We have found some conduct issues. We are removing you from your position. And then Greg Abbott gets to just appoint somebody until the next election. So, very scary amendment that we just passed. Proposition 13 was the standard property tax exemption. That was the one taking it from $100,000 to $140,000. Again, expires January 1st, 2027. Proposition 14, that was essentially the Texas mini NIH for dementia and Alzheimer's research. Again, creates a separate fund outside of the general revenue fund that the state legislature will regulate and determine how much money it's getting, when, where it's coming from, all of that. For all of these funds, the Texas comptroller has the sole discretion on how they spend that money, beyond a list of approved categories. So Kelly Hancock, our current comptroller, can just partner with somebody he knows, do a no-bid contract, and they have however much money they want, pretty much, as long as it's been approved by the state legislature. And then Proposition 15. This is the parental rights amendment in the state of Texas. This one, no other state has codified parental rights because it has been assumed as a given. We are the first, I believe, to legislate specifically what parental rights are, what you're responsible for, and essentially it gives parents the total and final say over anything regarding their child. Even if it may be harmful to them, even if it may be a detriment to their development, their growth, their learning, anything like that, they have the final say regardless. And that child has no other path. Oh God, how does that work for emancipation? I need to look into how that would work for emancipated teenagers. It may completely remove their ability to do that.
When I was doing the amendment presentation before the election, that was pretty much my biggest point, is I can see the implications of this amendment being so broad that we haven't even gone phase. And it could really complicate some court cases, and that's just another one that even I have.
Yeah.
It took you about 5 minutes to go by, because you have to balance the fact that, yeah, I mean, the state needs to protect the child, but then again, you know what I'm saying, there's some parents that make decisions that are very harmful for their kids, you know? There's been a couple where they refused cancer treatment, you know what I'm saying, man, we don't take blood transfusions.
Yeah.
For a child, you know, hey, this individual needs to be able to have some say-so, but, you know, it was a very big.
Yeah, it effectively, what it does is it cuts the children off from the village that helps raise them by design. I need to look into that one a little bit more, but I imagine we will start seeing reports of emancipation cases being denied. It's such a broad. You're right, Ashley. That is a super broad amendment that doesn't have a lot delineated. Yeah.
I was speaking with a couple of my neighbors on this that are more on the conservative side, and they were like, well, what's the big matter if there is an issue with this? Because they can always challenge it in the court system. And my response to that was, it takes an incredibly long time and a lot of resources to challenge anything through the court system. If somebody is in a life-or-death situation, like they're being refused a blood transfusion because of a decision that their parents made, that person is likely going to die before they even get a response back from a lawyer to book their initial consultation. So that's why these things really matter. And when you say that they're life or death, you're not exaggerating. I know I'm preaching to the choir with y'all, but
It doesn't happen every day, but there's some
all it
cases,
takes
you know,
is once.
you know, and it's your life. You know what I'm saying? The same
Yeah.
thing with the pro-life and the pro-choice deal, you know, whenever you deny, the doctors are gonna be, hey, they're gonna say, hey, I don't wanna put myself out there. Then you have people dying, when it could have been easily taken care of.
Well, yeah. From a medical standpoint too, right? Like you pointed out, right? If a child is at school and gets in a life-threatening accident, do they have to wait for the parents to get to the hospital before they can do anything now, or are they going to do what their medical training tells them to do, which is take care of the child? There's a lot of issues. Yes.
On top of that, this is now part of the Constitution.
Right. Right.
Which means that it's got to go even further in the courts, disputing the constitutionality of it, and then because it's in the Constitution, the judges have to go with what the
Right.
Constitution says,
Right.
or what the best thing for the child is.
Right.
And, you know, then a whole other process of having to amend the amendment
Right.
years before a simple thing could be resolved.
Yeah, and just to repeat that for the people on the stream, he was pointing out that it is an amendment. It is significantly more difficult to get rid of. It is significantly difficult to adjust. The courts would probably be the fastest way, because you know, as I was talking with Konstantinos about these amendments the other day, right? Even if I get elected, it's going to take so much effort to get just a few of those bad constitutional amendments repealed. And then I can start introducing legislation and constitutional amendments that make sense for everybody in Texas. It's almost at the point to where, you know, you almost need 2 terms to get anything done. Your first term is going to be fixing the damage and getting things back to a baseline that you can build off of, and then building from there. It's which again I'm sure is by design. Because if I'm elected and I can't get anything done in the first term because I'm spending time fixing the cracks in the foundation that are actually gaping cannonball holes from constitutional amendments, it's going to take, before lives materially improve out here, I have to fix a bunch of stuff on the foundation before I can start fixing the windows and the doors, the roofs, the flashing on the side. There is so much that needs to be rebuilt in Texas. It's going to take time, and it's going to take a connection between us as candidates or elected officials and y'all, the community, right? If I'm trying to repeal that law that bars teachers from striking or joining a union that claims the right to collective bargain, sometimes I might need to come back and hold a town hall and go, strike. Here's the resources for y'all to pay your rent, get food. Here's the community organizations that are ready and waiting on standby to support you through pressuring the state legislature with me to pass a bill that benefits you. It's the only way that we win with all of the money involved in Texas politics, is collective organization. Yeah.
I think that the job of a representative, whether it's at the state level or at the national level, is to stand 10 toes down in situations like this. They should be the ones that are not just on the picket line, but leading the strikes and rallies, and we shouldn't be having to beg them to show up and do the bare minimum and maybe speak a few words. They should be the ones in the front lines fighting with us, not sleeping comfortably in their bed when we need them the most. And looking around at our current representatives and comparing them to representatives up in just Houston, like Molly Cook, she's out there leading strikes with the Hilton workers that are trying to bargain right now. And our representatives, people like Cody Vasut and Mays Middleton and Randy Weber and Troy Nels, are really not, they're showing their true colors once again.
Okay. Last two amendments is the citizenship requirement, which was already a law. Again, there are a lot of, one of the things that I noticed through all of these amendments is all of the ones that ban tax collection or certain taxes are permanent. All of the ones that provide us relief, from the inconscionable tax burden that we hold as average Texans are temporary, right? So that they only did that for one of two reasons, right? One is they thought it would be enough to get them through the midterms. They could get their quick win on the property taxes. Two, if that doesn't work, then now they're going to need to be figuring out how to pass them every year or just make them permanent. Like what? They've put themselves in a bit of a pickle there in that regard. All while we are exempting these taxes that the state government desperately needs to function because we have cut off all of our other revenue sources. And that is where this lopsided tax burden is just going to keep getting worse, because the fastest way to offset the exemptions is just to have your appraiser come around and suddenly your house is worth an extra $50,000 than it was before. You've wiped out that homestead exemption to begin with. And that is where Texas is unique in that our local counties, our local cities, our city councils hold immense power in our tax rates and in using those taxes properly. Because the state does not directly collect property taxes. It's all through your county. So they're the ones that are setting your rate. They're the ones that are using that money to then put back into the county. That is why these county judge and county commissioner positions are so important. They are the ones setting your tax rates, as well as all of the school districts and the bonds. But the main thing is schools are only allowed to get revenue from property taxes or bonds. There is no other revenue for them to get, no other avenue for them to get revenue. Why? We know schools are massively underfunded in Texas. So why not create a separate fund like we just did for 4 other items to permanently fund our schools? Stop connecting it to property taxes. It's clearly not working right now. So find another way. Last amendment was the border tax exemption. Any businesses operating on the border or border security, I didn't see a number on the amendment that they get to exempt themselves from, but they are exempt from taxes if they are doing any sort of infrastructure or development along the border. So that big border wall that is supposed to be being built down there, we also get no money from that being built. We don't need the wall, but regardless, again, it's the same theme of cutting off ways of making money and increasing the burden on the average Texan. That has been the modus of operandum for the last 30 years of the Texas GOP. And that is what will continue to be unless we can flip the Senate, flip the House, flip a couple of these key races. Greg Abbott's disapproval rating is almost equivalent to Trump's right now. We have a real shot in 2026. If we get a Gina Hinojosa or Bobby Cole or any Democrat into that governor spot and we flip the Texas Senate, there is so much that we can do for the people of Texas at that point. And again, that is 5 total seats. That is all we need to make a massive difference for the people of Texas. So, all of that being said, I've got about an hour left. I have a microphone that I'll be passing around. Please feel free to ask us questions, any concerns that you didn't hear addressed or anything that we missed or anything that you want to know a little bit more about from any of the candidates that we have here. Now would be the time. My wife will be walking around with the microphone. Oh, I thought that's why you stood up. Yeah, Constantinos will do it, yeah. The baby's a bit more important. The baby's a bit more important.
All right.
Yeah, both work at the same time.
Yep. Does anyone have anything they want to share or ask?
I had a question. I guess it would be for both of y'all, right? And the question would be, I had the same issue with the Texas windstorm. You know, I mean, I started out when I first purchased my house probably about 12 years ago for $1,000, and now it's up to $3,700. You know, and I know that my brother recently has had an issue with his house being damaged with a storm, and they wanted to pay little to nothing, right? So I don't mind paying my windstorm, but whenever it's time for them to deliver, it needs to be, hey, here's your money, take care of your house.
Yeah.
You know, and that's not what's happening. But I also think that we need to figure out a different way of doing it other than insurance. I think a long time ago when we were younger, the government would step in and give low interest loans to people at 1%, 2% to rebuild after a disaster like that, versus having insurance companies who basically just there to profit. You know what I'm saying, right?
Yeah.
By not giving you back what you've actually deserved. So that's wanting to know what you thought about it and how you planned on fixing that part of it.
Yeah, so that's, I'm going to be honest, I only know what I pay in my insurance right now. It's one of the things I haven't looked into too much just yet. I'm still getting around to it. So I don't have a solid answer for you yet, other than I know that I pay almost twice what my actual mortgage principal is in insurance. And you're right. It's just it's one of the main issues with insurance companies is that the promise that you have is you pay into this thing, and then when you need it, it's there, no questions asked. But now we have, 20, 30, 100 pages of questions that they're going to ask us from the terms and conditions we signed as part of the policy. Mm-hmm. Part of what I'll get your contact information and get back to you with what I can find of a solution. But it is something that I do want to get into a little bit more, and something that I know Dennis Paul, who's the current Republican nominee for the state Senate seat, he is fully backed by insurance. So,
Yep. I'll give you some of my perspective from the federal level. Insurance is something that is typically state specific because there's different risks in different markets, but that's the response that representatives from Texas like to give. Like, we don't want federal oversight onto insurance companies in Texas or Louisiana or other typically red states. But if you look around the country in states, Texas is one of the few states that doesn't regulate the insurance market as heavily as other states. If you look at states like New Jersey, New York, or even California that have some of the strictest insurance controls in place, yes, there's still problems. Yes, those states are significantly more prone to natural disasters than even Texas, barring hurricanes, and their prices are going up. But they're premium increases and deniability claims are a lot more reduced. So Texas, one thing that I'm going to fight for is every single state, whether you're in a state that has no risk or plenty of risk, has the same level of accountability for all insurance companies. So I want to support each state having a citizen-led oversight board for all insurance companies. So not just elected official-led, but citizen-led, so that any rate increases for any specific insurance has to be approved by citizens just like us. And as well as companies shouldn't be able to just withdraw from specific regions of a state or an entire state just because they chose to insure, and then the thing that they promised to insure against happens, and then they're like, okay, now let's go, pack it up and go. I don't think that should be happening. We can't do that when things get tough. We can't just pack up and abandon everything like these insurance companies are. And I think they've been getting a free pass for far too long in most of the states. And part of, my agenda for, overall freedom includes freedom from things just like this, from insurance companies to be able to screw us over. And it's not just home insurance, property insurance, it's from auto insurance, from everything. Like, we've all heard stories of people being dropped from health insurance after one significant claim. And that, to me, is very wrong. And nothing will change until we, one, stop politicians from being allowed to receive money from the industries that they legislate on, at least at the committee level, and two, until we actually put some oversight onto these corporations.
Yeah, that's a good point. And to your point, I was talking with a veteran last week out here in Alvin, and he just got a letter from Texas Medicare. He just had open heart surgery. That due to the cost of his prescriptions, they will not be able to cover him on Texas Medicare after December 1st. This is a veteran in his 60s that just had open heart surgery. That medicine is about $7,000 a month.
So that's what they charge, that's not what it costs.
That's not what it costs, exactly.
Trust me, my father had the same issue with some of his medicine at the beginning of this year, you know what I'm saying? It went from $40 a month to $140 a month. I'm like, it doesn't cost more to make it, you know what I'm saying? Like, they're just,
Yeah, and a lot of that is like Texas Medicare isn't able to negotiate. Like, it's the same thing that we see with Medicare at a federal level, is they're not able to negotiate these prices. And we see exactly how much they cost. Like, what Mark Cuban's cost plus drugs, right? He can buy the generic version, sell it for a 5% markup, and sometimes it is thousands of dollars cheaper than buying it through insurance. So one of the things, at least in regulating insurance, to your point, is we need to let our healthcare companies, at least, and even homeowners in terms of like wind and hail insurance, be able to negotiate, not just have to take whatever you can get, right? Because the onus has always been on us. Go shop around, go find a different plan, see what you can find. Why can't I just negotiate with a provider that I've been with for a while that I kind of like? So that may be something else that we can look into for helping bring some of those costs down, because then that brings into collective organization. If our county organizes and decides we're negotiating with the major health insurance provider in the area, that's a lot of power that we suddenly hold with that insurance company.
And then a Randy Weber specific attack point that I like to use is that as many of you might know, I've been born and raised in New Jersey, and in 2012 we were hit by one of the worst storms in the history of the state, Superstorm Sandy, and it devastated our entire state. And I was in high school at the time, a freshman in high school, and it broke news that senators all over the southern states of the United States, Randy Weber, that was his first term, and he used his power during his first term to deny New Jersey federal assistance for these storms. And I remember thinking, ironically, like, are these people that lacking in empathy to care about another state? And then again, when hurricanes would hit our region, for example, I was surprised to know that Randy Weber doesn't always fight and vote for federal emergency disaster relief in Congress, which is very devastating for a region like us, which makes it more expensive for us to rebuild and for our insurance companies to also operate. And all of these have trickle down or trickle up effects. And another part of my platform that I'm going to be releasing is massive tax reform on in every aspect of our lives. And one of them is after a hurricane hits or after any storm hits. It doesn't have to be federally declared. You don't have to wait for FEMA to give you a claim. I want people to automatically be able to get some type of tax assistance or tax abatement where they don't have to be making withdrawals anymore or payments into the tax system quarterly for a while at least. Yeah. Did that answer your question? Or yeah. Yeah.
Any other questions? Yes. Oh, yeah, yeah.
Okay, so one of the things that I'm concerned about as an educator is just like wages and support for teachers. And so I know that that's a part of your platform. But even just looking for a job right now in education, like the wages are just abysmal, and like I wouldn't even be able to pay for childcare with the wage of a teacher, you know? And so anyway, can you talk about that a little bit more and what that would look like?
Yeah, so education in Texas, the more you peel it back, the worse it gets. Because of how the property taxes work, right? Each district determines the salary that they're going to pay. It depends on how much property tax revenue they're bringing in, right? It's why our property taxes are so high, because it's the only way that they're able to fund the local schools, right? And as counties grow, you need more schools, and you got to raise. Anyway, it's a death spiral that we're in. In terms of contributing to those budgets, the state of Texas does not contribute to the individual districts' budgets directly. They go through the county, then through the school district from that direction, or through TEA. One of the things that you can do to easily fix it, as we just saw from the 4 different funds that we passed, again, we can use that fund in isolation from everything else, pull it in from a different source than property taxes to ease our property tax burden, and directly fund those things, right? Now teachers and school boards aren't trying to run these PR campaigns to get bonds passed just to build a new gymnasium that they need or increase the teacher salaries that they want, right? I'm aware most of the bonds are not for teacher salaries, but the other part of that is there is no regulation on like administrative salaries or like superintendent salaries or anything like that, right? So we're seeing inflation in administrative salaries while teacher salaries stagnate. That's another thing that you can kind of legislate, right, is we can introduce a ratio of teacher to administrator pay, right? If the administrator is going to increase their pay, that means you need to increase all your teachers' pay by a certain amount to match that ratio, right? I think one of the main ratios that we see just outside of education in general is a good rule of thumb is from employee to CEO, right? So your lowest paid employee to the CEO is about a 1 to 70 ratio. I think the US is at 1 to like 3,000 or something. It's insane. So those are the small kinds of changes that you can do to the budgets of making things more equitable for teachers and administrators, right? You can't just vote to give yourself a pay raise and then turn around and show up on social media saying our teachers are underpaid. You could have paid them, but you didn't, right? So that's where even your school board elections get really important, because they decide where that money is going, right? So if your school board is just continually voting to increase the budget for administrative pay rather than teacher pay, that's what's going to keep happening. So when you get deeper into Texas government, your local boards, your local school boards, your local county boards hold a lot more power than we think. And that is where these races are so important. Like with Jim Moody and Stephanie running in these county level positions, they will directly impact your yearly budget, because they are determining fines you pay, taxes you pay, what percentage goes where all of that goes, right? And that is why these races are much more important than most people in Texas realize.
Mm-hmm. To that I might add, Texas is one of those states where we don't allocate any of the state's budget to individual independent school districts. And looking in other states that have a more equitable approach and seeing just the result of that shows how I think a little bit damaging that is. And I know we can't exponentially expand the federal budget to dump funds into every single independent school district. But that's why I think accepting federal money is very important, whether it's Medicaid expansion or accepting money from a properly funded Department of Education trickles down and betters and fortifies all of our schools, but also reduces our property tax burden. So you'll often see politicians on TV, especially when it was the floods in Central Texas earlier this year. A lot of videos resurfaced where town council meetings were taking place, and they said that they wouldn't accept federal funds from the Biden administration because they were skeptical of any strings that would be attached to that. And some of that I understand. There's a lot of regulation and mandates that come with accepting federal dollars, and that's something that I do want to address. But when we blanketly just refuse money because of which political party is sending it to us, I think that really harms all of us. And regarding the specifically public education, both of my parents are educators, and in the state of New Jersey, they were severely underpaid for a really long time, and through reform, they ended up increasing public education educators' pay, and the results were night and day. Attrition dropped, exponentially dropped. Exam scores for kids went up because teachers were able to be more focused, and teachers didn't have to drive Uber or work at a grocery store or have a second job. They were able to actually live a dignified life. And I think what we're doing to educators in Texas is a shame. We don't view them as a dignified profession, and honestly, it's not really surprising to me, because seeing how they don't really care about our kids. They don't care if all the kids in Texas get to eat. They don't care if they are able to, live a happy and healthy life. And I think that's incredibly important, why we elect leaders that actually care.
I killed it. To that point, right, of how do we pay for a lot of this, right? Texas does have a lot of money just kind of sitting around in our budget, but we can also offset that with federal funds, right? So me having a good relation with the next congressman for our district means that I can offset a lot of the financial burden from federal dollars and vice versa, right? There are multiple ways to bring in money to the state to alleviate further tax burden, right? And to your point about school lunches, I ran the numbers on how much it would cost everybody in the state of Texas a year to make sure that every child has a meal at school. $47 a year. That is all that it would cost. And we don't want to do that. And so there's these small pieces, right, of like $50, right? Everybody would be okay with that, but we're not explaining it in that way. We're saying, hey, will you approve $30 million or whatever in free school lunches, right? So from the get-go, that sounds way worse than it actually is. When you divide that out by 32 million people, let's say 22 million people given children, still $47 a year. And no child will have to worry about how they're going to pay for lunch or get lunch at school in the state of Texas. So.
And a lot of, we're probably going to get attacked when people hear ideas, or how are we going to pay for that? Personally, all my plans will have a positive offset, either net neutral or positive offset. And I think it's kind of hypocritical when Democrats get criticized for when we want to make investments in our communities, because when Republicans pass bills like the one big beautiful tax bill, they didn't worry about making sure that it offsets across 10 years or even 2 years. They're fine with adding $2 to $3 to $4 trillion to our deficit. And not saying that that's something that I want to do or support, but I think there's a lot of savings that can happen when we reform our tax system. As an auditor who audited some of the largest corporations, not just in Texas, but globally, I saw how many of them end up with a zero tax burden at the end of the year for the states that they operate, for federal taxes, and it's such a shame. They go into these communities, take up all these people, underpay their people, then underpay the communities that they're in. And that to me is something that needs to be stopped immediately. And let me give you 2 examples on why it's kind of hypocritical for them to attack us on that. In the Senate district race that happened on Tuesday with Taylor up in Waco, in Tarrant County, the Republicans spent nearly $4 million to unseat a candidate that spent $160,000. They spent over $4 million to try and unseat him. Do you know that $4 million can feed school children in all of those school districts for almost a decade? That's crazy. And then they didn't like that Taylor wanted to fully fund, school lunches and all of that. And if you look at New York City, for example, hundreds of millions of dollars were spent into trying to stop Zohar Mamdani from winning the nomination. Just a portion of that money would have been the increase in taxes that they would have had to pay. So it's not really about, with that fiscal conservatism, like they tell us. They truly are people that don't care about kids at the end of the day.
Any other questions? Yes.
So I do have a question in reference to surviving spouses of military personnel, as far as not only with the 100% disabled vets or any disabled vets. How would you assist a military spouse who's, for instance, died during combat? I had a neighbor, she was taxed out of her house. Her husband died, he was special forces. And she had to pay, I think it was about $13,000 in taxes maybe, in the Manville area. So she's no longer in the neighborhood.
Just to clarify, are you asking if I know of any resources that may be able to help her, or what my plan would be addressing that or preventing that from happening going forward? Mm.
So she still had to pay her property taxes. She was under the assumption that since she was a surviving spouse, that she automatically qualified, but it was only for disabled.
Okay. Okay. So that new amendment will give her an exemption on in that regard, right? Because it is for surviving veterans, surviving combat veterans. Unless it's only okay. I must have misread that. Thank you. I don't know. Let me look into what resources there are, what the current legislation is, what the current amendments are, and see what plan I can put together for that. Because you're right. That's. I don't know why she was not included in the bill the amendment we just passed. I would have been wanting to have that passed, and then, of course, right then that raises the question of, well, when you're doing these property tax exemptions that should be exempt, the rebuttal to that is, well, what about the money for schools? And that's where, just create a separate fund. Please just separate the school fund out from property taxes. And that way we can give these exemptions where they need to be given in those specific cases as well. But I have your email, so let me go home, look into it a little bit more, talk with you a little bit more, and figure out a plan that would work for everybody.
All right, my name is Karen Reeder, and I am running for state representative of House District 29 against Jeff Berry. Thank you so much. I just wanted to come out tonight definitely to support all of the candidates that are running on the Democratic tickets, and also to introduce myself. And I did have a question. Just wanted to kind of ask your thoughts on, right now in our government, it just seems like we need to very much fight for our democracy. And there's so many things that are happening that are overturning our rights as citizens, our rights as human beings. And I think the Democrats, over the last few decades, we've been very, following by the rules, playing by the rules, being nice, and, thinking that everyone is on the same playing field. But it seems like the Republicans are playing a different game. So, I'm encouraged by what happened on Tuesday and all of the energy that is behind the Democratic Party right now. And as you mentioned earlier, Cameron, we do have a chance. It's right there for us. We just have to mobilize and get our people together and make sure we all come out to vote. And but the question that I did have, and I want to get back to that, sorry. But what are your thoughts on the shutdown? Because it is going well beyond anything we could have even dreamed of or imagined, and it doesn't seem like there is an end in sight. And with that being said, it's going to impact Texans, it's going to impact families, and it is impacting, everyone that works for the government right now. But what are your thoughts on how we can kind of put things back together and maybe a plan or to make sure we don't have to go through this again? Thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. The shutdown is pretty personal to me because they're fighting over an issue that directly affects me, healthcare. So as some of you may know, to run for Congress, when I was making this decision, I had to factor in that I would quit my job. And I worked as an accountant. We were held to some of the strictest standards at the company that I worked with. We couldn't campaign. We can't collect any contributions as employees. And that meant losing my health care. And at the time when I made this decision, I was under the assumption that there would be the Affordable Care Act that would still be affordable in 2026. And when I started my campaign, there was still hope that the Affordable Care Act would be affordable next year. And 1 week into my campaign is kind of when the shutdown started intensifying. And that's when insurance companies started putting out notices on the increases for next year. And I myself got a quote that's almost 2.5 times higher than what the premiums were not just what I was paying with my employer, what the employee and employer portion combined were. What I have to pay next year is almost 2.5 times that. And I cannot afford that. I'm choosing to go without health care, taking on a risk. I'm 27 years old, I'm relatively healthy, but to me, I know that comes from a place of privilege where I can do that. There's other people younger than me, older than me that have ailments, that have something that prevents them from that. So I do applaud the Democrats for standing their ground because it looks like there's no budging from the Republicans on this shutdown. Now, I do think that the Republicans should be honest in their debate about this because they say that they want to pass a clean resolution, but a clean resolution isn't one that takes away federal funds. So in my opinion, it's not my opinion, it's factual that they are actually trying to legislate through these clean continuing resolutions. Two, I also find it pretty concerning that corporations themselves are now abandoning the American people, and corporations like United Airlines CEO Scott Kirby is writing letters to congressional members to, just get the government open. We can talk about healthcare when things open back up, but people don't realize that when we open back up, we might pass this and then they're going to recess for another 2 months because of the holidays. So they're okay with healthcare going up for the American population, and all these corporations are not going to fight for us because they're just going to increase the employee portion of the healthcare, unfortunately. So I know it's a difficult position for people that depend on their government income, and I really wish it wasn't the case, but I don't think things will actually progress until Republicans are willing to negotiate on health care. And I know that comes with a cost, but as of right now, I'm confident that companies like HEB, for example, organizations that are doing way more than what our own government is to relieve people's stress, I know that's not a good strategy for someone who is in Congress to hope that these companies step up and do their part that they don't even have to do. But I'm hoping that all of these network of resources can maintain, the health of the overall community and feed people while this issue is resolved. But it's also interesting to note that just because the government is shut down doesn't mean that Congress can be on recess, especially the House of Representatives. The Senate is in session, and this goes on to another debate or conspiracy theory on the Epstein files, but they're very clearly not wanting to swear in a duly elected member of Congress from Arizona, Alita Grijalva, because she would be the last petition for the discharge petition, the last signature for the discharge petition. So I think Republicans are the ones that are playing these games and then trying to pass it off. It's the Democratic people that are doing this. But I think it became very clear that the American people do not blame Democrats for what's going on, because we won in margins in New York, New Jersey, and Virginia. In states that are disproportionately impacted by federal government decisions, Virginia, for example, you would think with all of the hammering that was going on how this is a Democratic shutdown, you'd think that would resonate with the federal employee population that's in Virginia, but they saw right through all of these false, claims that it's a Democratic shutdown, and I think that is representative of the sentiment around the entire country, that it's the party in charge that is willing to negotiate. And there were several instances during Trump's term and previous when Congress was led by Democrats, like when Nancy Pelosi was in charge and we had a shutdown and Donald Trump was in power. She was still able to negotiate, and her and Chuck Schumer and other leaders to get the 60 required votes in the Senate to move things forward. The fact that the Republicans are unable to get that should not fall onto the Democrats, in my opinion.
Can I see it real quick? Sorry, guys. My bad, I'm gonna let you answer. I'll take that. Oh, you guys could just use this. Okay. Very smart to just leave it there. Good idea. Okay.
Yes.
I was curious about Proposition 7. It is surviving spouses.
Yes,
So,
it's the surviving spouses, but the veteran will have to have had some type of service-connected medical condition in order for the spouse to receive the exemption. But if they die in combat, they don't receive any type of exemption.
well, I don't know how it's specifically worded, but it just says surviving spouses of
So I'm a spouse of a military veteran, and if he dies due to his service-connected disability, it has to be service-connected. So if it's something outside that he isn't getting his disability based on, I wouldn't be able to receive an exemption. So it has to be listed on his disability as far as what he's receiving. Say, for instance, if it's high blood pressure or something service-connected.
I see.
If he passes away something for something other than a service-connected disability, I won't get his exemption. Or even a spouse that, for instance, my neighbor, her husband was special forces and he died in combat, so she couldn't receive any type of, yeah. He was just killed. He was just killed, so.
Well, she should be eligible. Well, that's what it may, not yet, maybe. I don't know when these go into effect next year.
I need to double check, but if from the reading, I think I remember what you were reading, the requirement is you need to be able to prove disability, right?
Yeah.
So effectively, you need to be able to discharge to then go get your disability.
I see. Okay.
Pain in and of its own.
Okay. Well, the way it's worded, it says surviving spouse. So, I know that sometimes these things don't mean what they say. But since we're talking a lot about teachers, I was wondering, are we gonna finally get rid of the exemptions that teachers have, where they can't collect their if they paid into a pension, they can't collect their spouse's Social Security? That is still the law, right? I'm sorry, they did that? Oh, I didn't realize that. I'm sorry. Okay, I didn't hear about it when it happened. I know Nick Lamson fought for years to overturn that, and I guess somehow, I'm sorry? They did that during regular session. Oh, okay, okay. Well, I missed that. I totally missed that. What I really want to ask about, and this is going to be a tough one, Citizens United, how are we going to get money out of politics? Okay, overturn it.
So this was another option that I was looking at to kind of mitigate Citizens United until it gets overturned. Citizens United only regulates federal level. The state of Texas could limit campaign contributions on their own if they wanted to. So I would be perfectly fine because as it stands now for my state level race, Elon Musk could walk in here and write me a check for $1 million and that's perfectly legal. Right, and that's, the 2 billionaires out in Texas, I don't remember their names, but that's exactly what we've been dealing with. It's how Greg Abbott has $86 million in his reelection campaign before even fully announcing. Wilson Dunn, okay, yeah. But yes, I would love to cap campaign contributions, make it to where they're individual contributions or specifically individual contribution PACs. None of the super PACs, no corporate donations, no corporate dollars, no APAC, none of that. Individual donors that have a cap, as well as individual PACs that collect only from individual donors, no corporate interests, would be what I would want to legislate in the state. Okay. He was out in Cyprus a couple weeks ago too. Okay. Yeah. Well, and that's what we saw with Taylor Emmett's race up in Tarrant County. That was a plus 17 for Trump district last year. He got 48% of the vote outright.
He got over 50% of the vote on election day.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and that's a plus 17. We were what, plus 20 out here? We're not that big of a difference. It's possible if you're going out and connecting with the actual people voting for you, which is such a low bar. It's kind of insane to me how low of a bar it is to just do the job of a representative. Meet people, talk to them, hear their concerns, and then go fight for them in your office. That's the whole point. But yes, that would be my plan for that. Any other questions? Oh, yeah.
You brought up another issue, the first part of your statement about, fighting for democracy. And I think one issue that the Democratic Party has failed to get through nationally is that 2016 and 2020 and 2024, they brand those elections as this is the most important election of your lifetime. And what that does to the American people is make them think that, okay, we just need to vote every 4 years. We'll vote this time and then we can go to brunch the next day. And the way that our democracy works requires that we fight for it not just every 4 years, not just every election day, not just every 2 years, but every single day, every single election, no matter how small, how big, from our city councils and town councils all the way up to our school boards and state board of education to our legislature, all those elections matter. So when the Democrats only focus on even their approach of only focusing on 7 swing states, in my opinion, is very wrong because they effectively tell people out in Southeast Texas like us or people in middle of nowhere, Alabama, there's a lot of Democrats. Some of those states vote 40, 44% for Democrats, and they effectively tell us that they don't matter. And I think why we're in this position right now is because the Democratic Party has withdrawn investment year after year over the course of decades from these parts, and we've been losing, Cameron loves this topic, but we've been losing support because of what the National Democratic Party has been doing. So I understand why we're losing union workers, blue-collar workers, because when the National Democratic Party doesn't even step foot in a state and views it as a chore, it sends a message that they don't really matter to our party. So one of the things that makes our campaigns even harder is that we have to rebuild that ourselves. Yep.
Yeah, I mean it is one of the most infuriating things to me in this regard of just the lack of support, right, and the fact that these races are winnable, right. And Tuesday, I would love to go watch all of those big data firms that are advising all of these campaigns go scurrying back to their analytics team and going, what does this mean for our campaign? What does it mean for my platform? Do I need to shift to a more progressive platform? Do I stay more moderate? There was a massive mandate from voters on Tuesday that said that they want progressive policies, they want progressive ideals, and that came from people flipping who had been voting for conservatives for 10 years, right? My generation, right? We were in 2016. I missed voting by a month. I turned 18 a month after the election. I watched all of my friends who were rabid Bernie supporters, and then he lost the primary, and they all went and voted for Trump. So they've been working on these things since that, right? But what we're seeing is when you give people a candidate that is authentic, that looks like them, that runs with them, that does the things that they care about and shows up to the things they care about, people want that. And that seems to be working. So.
I think one of the things that really hurt them, the Republican Party, was actually the shutdown. That hurt them drastically, and to see that, I think they have to regroup and re-strategize, but therefore we have an advantage because a lot of people, whether they're Republicans, conservatives, they're reaching back out to our party and joining forces with us to make a change. And in regards to engagement, one of the things that I've noticed in the area as far as engagement within my precinct and pretty much my neighborhood, some people feel as though that they've made it and they forget, about continuously voting. And that's one thing that's affecting our party is disengagement from a lot of people who've pretty much made it in life and think that, okay, this is it. I don't have to vote locally, only on a federal level. And we just have to refire up those people and get them a little bit more engaged so that we can have a bigger presence at the polls. And that's just my suggestions.
Yeah, and then to your point, right? Like we need to be out there when people show up to these events and are like, "Hey, I voted for Trump. This is not what I wanted." Right? As satisfying as "I told you so" may be in that moment, it's only going to push them away and recreate the same problem again. Right? If someone comes up and says like, "I voted for Trump. This isn't what I wanted. What do I do?" We should be connecting them with local community resources. We should be connecting with volunteer opportunities. We should be getting them involved with the party, right? The biggest disconnect that I have seen is Democrats abandoned people in rural and working class and rural people first. So then they went to Republicans, and now Republicans are pretty much indirectly killing them as a result. So we need to own that. We left y'all behind first, and that was a horrific decision that has had horrible ramifications for these areas of, I mean, I wouldn't even begin to imagine just the death toll just from lack of health care, lack of food, food scarcity, the opioid epidemics out here. Like, we left them behind, and now if they come back and are willing to give us a try again, that's because they are willing to do that, not because we've done anything to earn that vote back. And so when they come and say, "Help me," we need to be out there helping them. That's the point. So I absolutely agree. And that's what I've seen from a lot of areas around the country too, and it's working. So any final questions? Okay. Well, Karen.
Up and down Old Cullen Drive, but where 58 runs into it, There used to be a house sitting on the corner, nice house, sitting on about an acre, acre and a half. And I swear he'd have at least 3/4 of that acre covered with Trump paraphernalia, flags, so on and so forth. As I went by there today, they were gone. Now, did have a placard up that I could tell had a big American eagle on it, which that's okay. I love eagles too. They're beautiful birds. But it really struck me that the 20 to 30 signs that used to be up there were gone. So I don't know if he's gotten embarrassed or died or what, but either way, the outcome's been good. But I say all that to say this ain't the time to rest. And I will say from a relative of mine who's a Democrat, but he doesn't really get involved in the politics, but I know how he'll vote. But he's pissed because the Democrats stopped the Republicans from doing what they wanted to do. His thought process was, people are getting hurt now with the government being shut down. So hell, let the Republicans have what they want. And yep, those people are going to hurt, and so will a whole bunch more, and it'll just happen even sooner. Like I told him, I understand his thought process, but I'm awful afraid that I might be one of those that gets hurt worse than I already have. So I'd rather roll the dice in the direction we're going.
Yep. And to that, I've also heard that criticism, which is just reopen the government, just make this vote, and we can legislate it. We will most likely take back the House, the Senate. We don't know which direction that's going to go, and the presidency ain't changing until 2029, hopefully. And they're not going to pass Affordable Care Act subsidy extensions after they let them expire. And the soonest we'll get those costs back down, if we allow them to do whatever they want, is probably 2030. 2029 is when we might have a Democratic majority in all of the important branches, all of the important houses and Senates and presidency. And that to me is far too long. So.
On that note, because you mentioned it a minute ago, or one of you did, that the Democrats have always seemed to be worried about voting every 4 years because they wanted a Democratic president. You get enough congressmen and senators, I don't care who's sitting in the White House. All of a sudden, they're going to be like our commissioner's court. They'll be telling him which way we're going. And it's been a while since that happened. I'll shut up so we can go home.
No, that's a good point, because every time that somebody runs for president, their platform is very important because they're the ones that guide Congress, but it's also important to know what specific plans your Congress member has, because those are the ones that actually matter. So when we look at some congressional members and their platform is built around division and just blindly supporting whatever the party puts out, I think that gives Washington, D.C. a blank check if it's, a person of their party to do whatever they want. So I think we actually need to start finding congressional candidates that have, and Senate candidates that have full-blown plans for all of this, because when somebody just says, I'm going to do whatever my party's platform is, then they don't stand for anything, in my opinion. Yep.
Yeah, and with that, I'm going to end things a little bit early. I know this has gone almost 2 hours now, so we almost made it the whole way. But if you have any other questions, if you would like to sign, I don't know if you brought your petition. I don't know. Okay, everybody brought their petition. Great. On the back table is the petitions. If you would like to see us on the ballot, the biggest thing for us is I think most of us have some sort of a primary challenger. So March 3rd or March 4th? 3rd. March 3rd is the primaries. That is the most important date for our campaigns right now to even be able to continue on to the general and continue to fight. So make sure to vote in your primaries. If you would like to see us on the ballot, our signature petitions are back there. And I will be hanging around as well as the other candidates if you have any other questions or anything you wanted to talk to us about one-on-one as well. But thank you all for coming. The next town hall that I am doing will be on December 6th. That will be at the Angleton Public Library, and I will have the times and communicate that out through social media and the website as well. So other than that, thank you all for coming. Thank you for asking questions. Very glad to have everybody out here and involved. And we look to see you out on the campaign trail and at the following town halls. So thank you all.